Welcome to Energy Stew. This is Peter Roth, your host. And I'd like to ask you, what are you looking at? Who are you looking at? Maybe not this minute, but when you look at people, what do you first look at? And what do they first look at? I bet it's the eyes. The eyes have it. And why do we do that? What's so special about us that we have? All sentient beings, obviously, look at eyes. Why? Let's talk about it. And I want to talk about it with the author of a great book. He's been on the show many times. It's so wonderful talking with him. He's the author of Luminous Life, Dr. Jacob Liberman. Jacob, welcome to Energy Stew.
Peter, it's great to be with you again, always.
Well, it's so much fun to talk with you about esoteric topics. And these are very real because we all have eyes.
Yeah.
And you're very familiar with that. And you wrote a book about, they're called Luminous Life. So obviously we're illumined in many ways, but we can notice the illumination. So is that what we're looking at when we look at other people?
Well, the first thing to realize is that we're not looking. The first thing to realize is that the eyes are responding to something, and in their response, they call us in terms of what is looking for us. And then there's a response. So the whole idea that I'm looking for something is actually not based in fact, because something grabs the attention of our perceptual mechanisms, whether they be eyes or ears or nose, whatever. And those aspects, those sense organs, reflexively move. There's no voluntary action. It's a reflex. It's an involuntary action that moves them from some aspect of life that is calling out to them. Why is it calling out to them? Because that's the next aspect of our life's curriculum to attend to. And so then we are moved in that direction. So the eyes are literally informing us, and then we can talk about what us is, of what it is that's calling to us. That's the first thing. Let me just add another piece. You mentioned in the opening that we naturally look at each other's eyes. And most people are only aware that we have two of those, that there's one on each side of our nose. And so there's something about those eyes, maybe the sparkle in the eye, maybe the reflection in the eye, maybe the photons or energy that is emitted from the eyes that's calling to us. But there's something very important for the listeners to realize. Every cell in the body has photoreceptors, meaning every cell in the body has eyes. And those eyes, just like the eyes that we're aware of that are in our heads, those eyes are designed to detect and respond to light. What is light? Light is the most foundational energy from which all of life emerges. It's the quantum soup, if you will. It's the place where formless through some alchemical process that no one really knows, formless takes on form. It's
Right.
what we experience.
I'm
So,
glad you said that it takes on form, and that it's all part of the overriding consciousness of all of our beingness, which has parts throughout the body that knows itself and communicates through these photons on a regular basis, every
right,
fraction of a second.
right.
And we're part of that. But what I like about what you've said is that we're not running the show is running us, and it attracts us, and we become conscious of it, and then we think that we're running it because
Right.
we're conscious of it.
You know, what we experience as reality, which physicists call, or what Chopra used to refer to as a quantum soup, is essentially a series of energy fields. Each one has a certain vibratory rate. Each one has a certain vibratory rate, or rate at which it oscillates. All of these different fields, which are part of the electromagnetic spectrum, and then a spectrum that we call subtle energy, all of these fields are congruent and coherent with each other, which means they're designed in such a way that they're harmonious with each other.
Sure.
It's almost like they're all vibrating at different speeds, but there's no traffic jam.
Right. So what it is that they're all information fields.
Right.
And the information is much more sophisticated than we can imagine.
Right.
And
It's
so,
not only information, it's information that is in formation.
right. It's carried in the coding of form in our bodies through, let's say that photons speak in form, and we're created in a form that relates to the whole field, like just our personalities, our looks, everything is part of the information that defines us.
Yeah.
And yet I want to come back to the eyes, because why aren't we drawn to look into people's noses or ears? You know, we're drawn to their
Well,
eyes.
we don't actually, you know, if you look at the eyes, you'll notice that they never stand still. Anytime you try to attend to something, which means you try to hold your focus, it causes everything to start to constrict. Your muscles, the field of vision, your eyesight, everything instantaneously starts to contract, because the only constant is change. The eyes are continually moving in response to everything in life that's calling them. To give you an example, you and I are speaking to each other on Zoom, and we believe we're looking at each other. Unbeknownst to us, most of the time that we think we're looking at each other, we're actually not. Our eyes are picking up all the information all over the place, because they are designed to always guide us where we need to be. Not where we want to be, where we need to be for survival to occur. So they're always responding to the invisible bits of information in these photons in light, so they can always pull our attention where necessary, so we can attend to what's going on. So what I'm sharing with you is that, one, this is happening with every cell in the body. The reason that we seem to notice the eyes on our head is because we can't see the eyes in ourselves, but they're continually communicating with us as well. We're continually getting information which is picked up on incredibly subtle levels through the energy that is formless. It's not even a formed expression yet. It's before it takes on physical form. So, for instance, in Luminous Life, I share some interesting information about the fact that it's very common that we hear the expression today that, you know, we have to make choices and that we're continually making choices. And so what I started to share in the book, which I thought was very interesting, is that well before we are ever aware of doing what we think is making a choice, our brain has already done all the calculations and is already moving in that direction. So it's not at all that we're making a choice. It's merely that well after the fact, we become aware of it.
Right.
And the ego says, look what I came up with.
Right.
Now, in the book, I speak about the fact that that occurs with, at least the research at that point said that occurred 7 to 10 seconds before we were aware of it, which in brain time, it's like multiple lifetimes. Very recently, a new study in Australia, the original were done in Berlin, found that 11 seconds before, the brain was already recording. Now, keep in mind, the brain is not the decider. The brain is actually the recording of what the decider has decided. We don't know what the decider is. Let's call it non-local consciousness for the moment.
Or our subconscious.
Well, yeah. So what I'm trying to share is the movement of our system is known on some level an infinite amount of time before we ever become aware of something. And I only know that as a factual thing because I've been very sensitive since I'm a child, and I have had numerous experiences where things have come to me in the night or at other times that I wrote down, that I shared with family members in detail, and a year later, exactly as I saw it, it occurred. Now, this has nothing to do with me. I'm saying this is part of our humanity, and why this is so important is that we're under the illusion that we're driving the car. And there is something amazing when we begin to tune in to what you called esoteric. You used that term in the beginning. Now, if I said to someone today that most of a tree is invisible, you don't see it because it's under the ground, but it's what keeps the tree erect. It's what nourishes the tree. Well, most of us is under the ground. We don't see it. We hardly see any of it. It's like an iceberg. You see something, you say, oh my God, what a big iceberg. And it's only 5% or something. Most of what's going on is all occurring at an unconscious level. And it's designed to be unconscious because it's at the level that the Bible would call God and physicists would call the quantum level of reality and all of that. It's at a level where we cannot even envision that. It's interesting, we're having this conversation, you know, we just had a Passover Seder. And in the Passover Seder, they were talking about Moses receiving the 10 Commandments. And the person who was leading the Seder talked about the fact that the Jews never use the name of God.
Right.
They speak around it, but they never say the name of
They have
God.
alternative names.
Yes. And the reason is because there's something within that that is so beyond us that we can't even fathom it. And so when she was explaining that, I said, I don't know if you're aware of this, but as the story goes, because Moses was interacting supposedly with God, and because there's no way for us to envision that level, he was only able to communicate with the back of God's head, could not look into God's eyes. That's the way it's actually written. And so what I'm saying is the reason these processes are unconscious is not because we're supposed to dig them up, because when you uncover the roots of a tree, you essentially kill it. It's because they're designed to be unconscious. It's designed to happen without our knowing. And part of the contentment in life is this discovery that we're living a miracle all the time. That there's what's going on. We have no.
Right, to get out of the way of it. This is the old Wu Wei principle of Taoism.
Yeah.
Is just deal with what's in front of you because you don't know any better.
Right.
And so, it's fascinating. I've been working with these concepts for a while now. I gave a talk last summer about how our conscious mind is actually receives very little information, just what the subconscious wants to give it. and that, we really need to be humble about being the passengers on the ship, but still enjoy the ride, have fun, relax, and know that, we're not in charge, and appreciate how sophisticated this subconscious reality, connected in the universe is. It's very, very powerful. Then the question, of course, is, well, if it's that smart and that all-knowing, why isn't it doing a better job for us? and not solving all our problems? And
let's speak to that a second. It was Sigmund Freud who first came up with the term subconscious and eventually gave up that term, because when you say subconscious, your ego says, oh, it's a little beneath the surface, and my job is to make that conscious. Nobody uses subconscious anymore, other than a lot of New Age.
I use it only because I differentiate from conscious. And it's simple.
Right, but what I'm saying is, no one, scientists or even most psychologists don't even use the word subconscious any longer, because they realize that they're unconscious. These are unconscious processes that are not unconscious because we're asleep. They're unconscious because they're designed to occur on autopilot, and the autopilot is the default setting of optimal humanization, if you will. It's designed to function at a level we could never fiddle with and create that level of perfection in our own system. So that's the first thing. The second question is, why do we have so many, as my grandmother used to say, tsuris, aggravation?
Right.
And, we'll go back to the Bible. When Moses came down, I think they had created a golden cow or a golden calf, which was an idol. And the whole message was, no idols can replace me, can replace the source. what you call the conscious mind, which we don't even know whether that exists, with just a name for it, which is our awareness of something coming to the surface. We call it thinking, which makes us think that we are thinking it. In actuality, we just are becoming aware of an air bubble that surfaces from the unconscious for some reason unbeknownst to us, and we become aware of it. Why do we have so many different things in life that are troublesome? No one understands this, whether it's karmic or this or that. You know, I can't tell you that I have an answer, but I think this is part of an answer. We've come to believe that the idol is the real thing. When we hear that chattering voice, and when we've been conditioned from the time we were babies, that is our mind, that our mind is a terrible thing to waste, was the commercial that we heard for years, that you needed to use your mind, you needed to think ahead, you needed to do all these things as if we were doing it. So in fact, that was us.
Well, then how do you hold intention?
What we call intention, most of the time, is us trying to force something that isn't. It's us trying.
Intention can actually create a pathway. Not that we think that we're creating intention, because again, that assumes that we're thinking, but we're having thoughts about having intention. So we're fed this idea from our unconscious that we need to create some intention that comes to our mind, you know, that our unconscious is creating intention and brings it to our mind.
Good. What you're calling intention from the unconscious is what I call the bubbling of inspiration. Something comes to the surface, which is part of our reason for being. It grabs our attention, and usually we get excited. We get excited. It's like, oh my God. And usually we say, oh, let me tell you what I just came up with. But it isn't us that came up with it. It came to our awareness. We were inspired and excited. Once the fire is on, there's no need to add more lighter fluid. Once the fire is on, there's nothing to intend. It's already happening. It's already moving us.
And our unconscious is taking care of it.
Well, listen, there isn't a single thing in your body, a single function of your body that you're controlling. Not one.
Right, it's automatic, I know.
The whole thing is automatic. And your body, like the body we call Mother Nature, and then this bigger body we call the cosmos, the whole thing is on automatic.
Right. And what I like is that we can identify the patterns of it to understand it. And, you know, and
I don't know whether we actually understand it, but I guess what I'm sharing is I have found throughout my life that I'm always guided where I need to go. And I don't mean that in some loosey-goosey way.
Synchronicity, serendipity are always at play. It's amazing how magical life is.
Well,
we're getting near the end
you
of the
see,
show.
this thing that the scientists notice, that your brain knows 11 seconds before you're even aware, that is only because the limitation of our measurements is such that we can only measure up to 11 seconds. In reality, your body knows right now, it's already making the adjustments to the next season that's coming up. It's Your body is every second making a subtle adjustment so that when summer comes, the gears in your body and the gears of Mother Nature literally lock synchronously at a perfect moment, and you're right in stride. And that is going on continually. So what I'm sharing with you is that this thing we call awareness, or this thing we call consciousness, which we think is something personal, it isn't. It locks us up to infinity, backwards and forwards, past and
so we're really at the end of the show now. So we're now at an infinity, and I love that. And we're infinite, and I always tell people that, you know, it's hard to imagine living infinitely because it's incomprehensible. But this is only one, you know, quick spark of it. So
I guess I think the main thing I want to share is that our system is continually using all of its eyes to detect the invisible and move us on the pathway. And the only place where we get into a lot of tension, more tension than is necessary with life or ordinary with life, is that we have yet to uncover that this process is occurring miraculously under the scenes. And
right. Okay. Well, but we do have to stop. And I know I led off the show talking about looking in others' eyes. So we'll have to do another show that has to do with our relationships to others. How this all, because we talked about ourselves and what is it that, how we connect with others and through what means of awareness. And certainly we are aware even if we're not thinking for ourselves. So our awareness is always immediate. So Jacob Liberman, the author of Luminous Life, is there a website?
Yeah, they can go to jacobliberman.org, O-R-G, and it's Liberman.
That's wonderful. Jacob, thanks so much. It's
my pleasure.
Always enlightening to talk with you.
Thank you.
And this is Peter Roth, your host of Energy Stew at prn.fm. I can be reached at peter@heartriver, Heart, river.org. I'd love to hear from you, and thanks so much for listening.